what information is included in a SOC 2 report? So there are four main sections in a SOC 2 report. The first section is the Independent Service Auditors Report. It's about 3 to 4 pages long, usually. It's pretty templated language. Auditors have to use certain language when they issue their portion of the report. In this report, in the Independent Service Auditors Report, in section 1 of the report, it's going to include the scope of the report, the date, if the audit period of the report covered, if it's a type 2, or the as of date, if it's a type 1, each party's responsibilities, including the CPA firm's responsibility, the organization being audited, their responsibilities, inherent limitations in the audit. And it's also going to include any third parties or subservice organizations that were important. It's also going to include the opinion that the audit firm renders over the report. Section 2 is management's assertion letter. This is a letter that management has to provide to the auditor, and the auditor, as part of their audit, is actually stating that the firm being audited, or the customer being audited, that their assertion is accurate, it's complete and accurate. And it's a templated letter that a CPA firm will provide you at the end of the report. Somebody in management has to appropriately sign that letter, and it has to be included in the report. Section 3 is a system description. This is where you will describe all your controls, background on your company, infrastructure, software, the people, the processes, technology that make up your system. This has to be complete and accurate. As part of the audit, a CPA firm is also rendering their opinion over that system description. This can be a lengthy document the first time you write it, so a lot of firms have a template that they provide to customers and can guide them as they help them write that. Section 4 is the actual results of the testing. If you're doing a type 2, this is a very important section because it'll actually include all the test results and whether how the audit firm tested the controls and whether they passed or whether they had exceptions. If you're just doing a type 1, section 4 might not be included in the report, or if it is included, it's only going to include the controls. It won't actually include testing because technically the auditor didn't perform any testing over the operating effectiveness. There is actually also an optional section 5 of the report called Other Information provided by the service organization. A lot of times organizations will use this to respond to any exceptions, or they will include future releases of their product, or if they had a merger and acquisition, they might put that information in here. It's an unaudited section, so the auditor is not rendering an opinion over the information in this section, but the auditor has a responsibility to make sure that nothing in that section contradicts with the rest of the report. So those are the 5 sections of the report. Again, section 5 is an optional section, and if you don't have any exceptions or there's really nothing to report on, that section probably will not be included in the report. Can you pass or fail a SOC 2 report? So technically, it is not a pass-fail audit. It's an opinion rendered by a CPA firm on whether your controls are meeting the applicable trust services criteria. This is not a certification like ISO 27001. So there is no passing, there is no failing. It's just a report on your controls over a given period of time. And it is what it is. Whether you have a really bad control environment or a really good control environment, you're still going to get issued a report. So what are the results, or what is considered a good report result, right? So there's 4 types of opinions that an auditor can render. The first one is unqualified. Now, unqualified might sound like a bad term, but it's actually the highest opinion that an auditor can render. So what unqualified is actually saying is that all your controls are designed appropriately and they're operating effectively over a given period of time in a type 2 to meet the applicable SOC 2 criteria. The second type of opinion is a qualified opinion. So what this basically says is all your controls are in place, they're designed, they're operating effectively, except you had these errors over here, you had these problems, and you weren't able to meet these specific criteria. And the report will actually list out which criteria were not met and why they were not met. What controls did not operate effectively, that caused a criteria to not be met. The third one is an adverse opinion. Now that one sounds pretty bad. And basically when an auditor issues that opinion, they're actually saying that your controls were not designed appropriately. They did not operate effectively to meet the SOC 2 criteria. And the fourth one is a disclaimer of opinion. So basically the auditor in this case is saying we cannot render any type of opinion because maybe we had a scope limitation. We weren't given the information. We weren't allowed to do the audit. There's other reasons, but basically they're disclaiming an opinion. So you get a report that says we were not able to render an opinion because we could not perform the appropriate procedures. Adverse and disclaimer of opinion are pretty rare. They are out there. I've seen them before, but they're pretty rare. What does it mean to receive a SOC 2 report, and is it a certification? So obviously, if you all know me, this is one of my favorite myths to bust and one of my favorite things to answer. So SOC 2 is not a certification. It is actually an attestation report. So a CPA firm is actually attesting and rendering an opinion over your control environment. Unlike other certification ecosystems like ISO 27001 or CMMC or anything like that, those are certifications. SOC 2, again, you're not getting a certificate that says, hey, you passed the audit, here you go, here's your certificate. You're actually getting a report that is a report on your controls, and it is what it is. It's not going to change. It can be good, it can be bad. Another piece that's important is that your SOC 2 report doesn't expire. Yes, your customers are going to expect you to have an updated audit, probably once every 12 months, and it should be a type 2 report covering that 12-month period, the operating effectiveness. But the actual report that you have currently will never actually expire. There is no expiration date because it's not a certification. ISO 27001 is a certification, and it expires every 3 years. And you actually have to have surveillance audits to maintain that certification in the 2 years between your certifications, your recertification. Another reason it's not a certification is because there's not a standard like ISO 27001 where it actually has clauses and calls out what you need to actually do to complete the audit. All SOC 2 is a set of criteria, and you have to figure out your own controls to meet that criteria. It's not, 27001 has very specific requirements that say you need to define your scope, you need to define your interested parties, you need to perform a risk assessment, you need to have a risk treatment plan. It's not like that in SOC 2. So the main thing to get out of this is that ISO 27001 is actually a certification. You're going to get a certificate. It's going to expire. A SOC 2 report is a report that can be good, can be bad. It's just a report of the current state of your control environment. And it's used for risk management mainly. The SOC 2 report has all that information where your customers are able to assess the risk of using your services. ISO 27001 is just going to be that piece of paper, that certificate, and it will not give any information on whether controls were in place, what controls might have been non-conforming, because you can actually have minor non-conformities and still get the certificate. It's just a certification.